I'm just going to introduce our next speaker, which is Ema Bašić, who did an exchange between University of Zadar, University of Glasgow. And she came to Glasgow to kind of investigate and research Glasgow's expertise on Scottish rural areas to support her own project in Croatia, which is on the development of cultural and creative industries in the rural region of Lika in Croatia. And Ema's presentation is titled Comparison Between Rural Creative Industries in Scotland and Croatia. Ema, over to you.
Thank you, Martina, for the introduction. I hope you can see the screen now. As Martina already told, the title of my presentation today is Comparison Between Rural Creative Industries in Scotland and Croatia, even though I'm going to focus more on the findings during my research visit in Scotland. So the main aim of my research exchange was to develop theoretical and methodological background for the PhD thesis on rural creative industries in one specific Croatia's region. The reason why I decided to go to Scotland is because most of the research on creative industries in rural contexts were conducted in Scotland, and they actually shown that creative industries have been proven to be important to improve quality of life, social cohesion, local identity, but also to create sustainable and high quality enterprises and new jobs, which all leads to rural diversification. So that's how I actually decided to, for my PhD thesis, to explore experiences of creative practitioners living in Lika and to explore the role of creative industries in sustainable development in this region. Speaking of this region, I decided to add this map so that you can see where this region exactly is. So during this research visit, I conducted interviews with experts from many organizations such as Highlands and Islands Enterprise, Creative Scotland, Shetland Arts, and many others. But I also spoke to different academics and creative practitioners, and I also listed here places where that I have visited and which have helped me to gain a wider insight into the situation with rural creative industries in Scotland. So speaking of creative industries, it is important first to define this term, and there are still discussions about it, even though the most common used definition is the one that I added here at the beginning. But one of the interviewees actually complained that not so many different industries can be placed in the same category, which all leads to the question how to define creative industries, and that's definitely a question that's going to be further discussed in the thesis. While conducting these interviews, I actually listed the most common creative industries in Scottish rural areas, and those are screen and broadcast, music, Gaelic language related culture and channel, textile, music, publishing, crafts, painting, photography, but also theater and performance arts that were strongly affected by COVID crisis. That's what the interviewees say. And that's not the only difficulty that the creative practitioners in the rural areas were facing. They are also facing obstacles because of the housing prices due to many second and holiday homes in many Scottish areas, such as Isle of Skye, but also with tax costs. Also, rural areas are facing problems because of the aging population. First, because they are usually practicing traditional skills, and now that they are getting older, those kind of traditional crafts are dying out because no one can show the future generations how to continue that work, but also due to their lack of IT skills, which are really important for the rural areas because of the using broadband connectivity for not only making their work more viable, but also for networking and accessing international markets. They are also having problems with attracting new incomers, which could actually bring a totally new perspective and contribute to the rural diversification. Another big problem that was mentioned by interviewees was public transport that actually sometimes they don't have this opportunity to use the public transport. And all these facts actually show how there are inequalities in everyday life, but not only that, but also in the access to culture, which is very often the subject of many research. So public transport was a big obstacle because of the remoteness, but this remoteness was also highlighted by interviewees from 3 different categories, as I already said, like from organization members, from academics, but also from creative practitioners themselves. They all say that there is something about the remoteness, why creative practitioners decide to relocate to these remote areas, because it not only that it gives them some kind of an inspiration, but it also helps them to focus on their creative practice. Not only a beautiful scenery and landscape can help them to focus, but also support that they are gaining from the organizations. So organizations are helping them with mentoring in form of an advice, help, or collaboration. Another really important fact is networking, because this quote actually illustrates this point very clearly. Someone on the other side of the mountain is maybe doing something that could be relevant to someone on the opposite side of the mountain, which actually means that if there is someone and they don't know about that person, which could be really helpful for their work, it's not going to be useful. So that's why the networking is really important for them to establish international networks, but also to access to international markets, because sometimes local markets are not enough to contain and to maintain their work. For networking, events have been shown to be really important as well, but also for presenting their work and for finding inspiration for their further work. As I already said, like broadband connectivity, but also information and communications technology are important for the accessibility and networking. And another really important fact is the education, because, for example, Highlands and Islands Enterprise is collaborating with the University of Highlands and Islands in order to provide more practical elements for students and to show them, to prepare them for the labor market. But also they are providing education for people who didn't have a chance to leave their remote areas, such as, for example, Shetland, where one of the creative practitioners told me that she was actually attending some courses there on their college. Also, education is important in terms of providing or actually organizing workshops about IT skills, and also how to use internet to make their work again more viable online. Finally, we are coming to the heritage, which is, according to some of the interviewees, the key differentiator for rural areas because of its authenticity, and hereby storytelling plays a crucial role. As one of the creative practitioners says, we are standing on the shoulders of giants, which means that in some of the remote areas, there was always an active creative community. They are trying to maintain that today by actually producing authentic artifacts, which are continuing this whole creative story of specific rural areas. Another key finding was about cultural regeneration, which could be a topic for itself, but it actually showed how culture and arts in the village can be established as well by establishing multifunctional art centers, or by using some old buildings, such as, for example, in Redwood in England, by using the old school as an art center. By thinking how could I compare Croatia's region of Lika with Scotland, I actually checked one of the first facts, that's population density, and it turned out that it's the same for the area of Highlands and Islands, and Lika actually 8 persons per square kilometer. But that's not the only similarity between these regions. There are also similarities with some other, such as with Argyll and Bute, which have no central town. But that's the case with Lika as well, because there is no central town. There are many like dispersed centers. and also with Dumfries and Galloway, where people usually just drive through the region in order to get to some other destination, which is the case with Lika as well. Tourists, but also other people drive through this region and don't stay there. They just drive through it to get to the coast. Another indicator was traditional festivals that are being held in Scotland and Croatia, and which are really important for promoting not only rural areas, but also their heritage to wider audience. As I already said at the beginning, I actually listed the most common creative industries in Scottish rural areas, but I decided to compare that with Lika, and in comparison to Scotland, screen and broadcast and publishing are not present in Lika region, even though the first printing house in Croatia was in this region, but it's not present at the moment. Crafts, textile, and music are still, especially traditional music and folk dance, are still very present and part of the creative industry story in Lika. In comparison with Scotland, language is not that much present in creative industries in Lika, but there are some attempts to, for example, promote the old Slavic script glagolitic by making some products. And also there are some examples of there are some painters that are actually practicing their work in Lika, and also photography and theater. I put some photos here so that you can see some of the examples of pottery, paintings, theater, and some other craft products. And I would like to conclude this presentation by one motivational quote by one of the interviewees. It takes time to develop anything, but it can be done anywhere. So I strongly believe that if there is enough effort, if you put enough effort by organizing different events or establishing different organizations, that creative industries could be established and well promoted in Croatia's rural area of Lika as well. And I'm gonna conclude also this presentation with one quote: "You imagine what you desire," and I actually hope that I'm gonna find some interesting examples in Lika as well as I found those in Scotland. Thank you for your attention.